certain elements pushing a belief that that money is going to stay anywhere within this community. That money is going to go straight into the shareholders of these mining companies, and once it's gone, it's gone. What will be
Hmm.
taken, what will be depleted by these processes, you know, you're never getting that back. You can talk about rewilding, or you can talk about sort of reintroduction of species, but once you break that ecosystem, you are never going to fix it. You are never going to be able to restore it.
Welcome to the Save Our Sperrins campaign, Voices from the Frontline. I'm Morella Fife, your host and a member of the Save Our Sperrins team. At the heart of this struggle are the voices of local people, farmers, families and young campaigners whose homes, work and families are rooted in this place. Their voices are joined by supporters from across the world, standing in solidarity, from professors to artists, from those offering vast expertise to those whose presence alone is an act of support. All have stood with us. In this series, we share stories of resistance, resilience, and hopes from those determined to protect these mountains, their land, their rivers, the very air they breathe, and their community. Let's get started. Today I'm talking to Julie from Dart Mountain Cheese, a small artisan cheesemaker tucked into the foothills of the Sperrins near Park in County Derry. If you've ever tasted their cheeses, you know there's something unmistakably local about them, something shaped by the mountain, the farms, the weather, the people and the land. I met Julie briefly at a Christmas craft fair last year, and even in that short conversation, it was clear how deeply rooted her work is in this landscape. Dart Mountain Cheese is one of those rare businesses that grows out of the land. Their story is about craft, patience and place, but it's also about what it means to make a living here in a sustainable way at a time when the Sperrins are under pressure from an entirely different kind of economic model. In this conversation, we start with Julie's own journey into cheesemaking, and then we widen it out, exploring what it takes to build a livelihood in the rural northwest, what local food can teach us about long-term resilience, and why clean air, clean water and healthy soils aren't abstract ideas, but the daily foundations of producing real food. It's also a story about community, the people who stand beside you, buy from you, encourage you, and keep small rural enterprises alive. So settle in and join me for this gentle, honest chat with Julie from Dart Mountain Cheese. Julie, welcome to the podcast and thank you for being here today. I wonder, could you start by describing where you are today and then a little bit about yourself before you started cheesemaking?
Yeah, I'm over here in Park, just outside of Park Village. And this is where we live, and this is where our company, Dart Mountain Cheese, is based. So we're sort of in the Sperrins, and as I say, just outside the village of Park.
That gives me a kind of a sense of who you are, but I need to ask you a little bit more about your family. Have you a partner or have you children or where are you?
Yeah, I have my husband Kevin, who's my partner in this life and my partner in this business. He does all of the business end of the business, while I do all the cheese making, and that seems to work well, or it has for the last since we started the business about 15 years ago. As I say, he handles the business, I handle all the production, and as long as everybody stays in their lane, that seems to work out quite nicely. We have 4 children, just one left at home, and the other three have up and flown the nest at this point. We moved to Park about 20 years ago, and have happily been here ever since.
And I'm guessing by your accent, you're probably not native to these parts.
No, it's a kind of a funny feeling because I've tipped over that I've spent more time in Ireland than I did in the United States. I was born and reared just outside of Boston, about 15 miles west of Boston, in a small suburban town. And I first came to Ireland, I would say, in the maybe late 80s, maybe 1990. And initially I came on I was at university in New York City, and you were able to do a year abroad at a foreign university to kind of enhance your studies, which I did. And I ended up at Queen's University in Belfast studying politics. That's also where I met Kevin, my husband. And then I went back to graduate in New York and worked for a while in Washington and various other places, and then eventually came back to Ireland to settle here.
Okay, that gives us a good sense now of who you are. Um, how did the cheese making find you, or how did you find it? And what were those early beginnings like?
The cheese making, we found each other. I had always worked in, like many teens of my youth, we all started our first jobs, babysitting local kids or in restaurants or dishwashing or whatever. So I had always worked in hotels and restaurants from I was quite young. I spent a summer working as a cook on a cattle ranch out in Wyoming in the western part of the United States. So I sort of food service was always something I had done. And then in the late 90s, Kevin and I had a restaurant in Dairy City for a couple of years. And one of the things that we noticed, in sort of the southern part of Ireland, there are tons of sort of small artisanal cheesemakers and, world-class cheeses. But up here in the north, there didn't seem to be as much of a tradition of small cheese making. There was more sort of industrial block cheddars, and we wondered whether there was a sort of an opening in the market there. Kevin had worked as well as he ran an organic farmers cooperative over by Killaloe, and that sort of gave him an introduction to sort of local makers, producers, farmers, in this area. So when we closed the restaurant, we sold the restaurant on, and we decided that we wanted to get into food production. Food production has always been my interest. And we saw cheese as that there might be an opening there. One of the first times I made cheese, I was out with my brother and his wife out in the western part of the United States, and we milked their goats, we made the cheese, and I was just absolutely hooked the first time I made cheese, just sort of the amazing alchemy of turning liquid to solid, and it just stuck.
Oh, wow. It's always fascinating to hear how things start. When was the moment it became real?
Uh, yeah, that moment may not have happened yet. You're still kind of, even though we've been doing it for 15 years, you do still feel like you're kind of nurturing a business and thinking about how to make it grow, how to keep on doing what you enjoy doing. But we originally came out to this area just for pure logistics because we needed space. Cheese production takes a lot of space. It takes a lot of equipment, both in the manufacture of cheese and also in the aging. And so we were looking for physical space, preferably near to a home, to a dwelling, so we could live and work in the one area. And this house presented itself. I was actually in the United States when Kevin found this house, and he first took his mother. Kevin is from Dairy City, and he first took his mother out to see it. And after driving the whatever 15 or 17 or whatever miles out to park from Dairy City, she said, "Well, you might as well move to America for going out this far." So, but move we did, and now I think everybody thinks of it as just a short hop down the highway. So.
Yeah, seems like a good move for you. So once the seed was planted, the place itself clearly played a role. Let's explore that a little bit. Um, what was it about the Sperrins that made this the place to root your work and your life?
Well, initially, to be honest, as I said, it was just about finding a physical space where it was possible to bring, to kind of begin production. I was completely unaware of the Sperrins. I had lived in Derry, I had lived in various parts of Donegal, back in Derry again. We went back to New York for a while, back to Donegal, back to Derry, and sort of around and round and round we went. And I had no idea that the Sperrins were here until I moved here. So but I do remember that the first time, he took me to see this place, and I drove up the road to it, and I said, "Well, I said to him, I said, I don't really care what the house looks like. I just looked around at what was there, and just this incredible, natural beauty, which really, to this day still amazes me. So I was hooked. I was an instant convert when I moved to the Sperrins.
And I don't blame you. I live here at the edge of the Sperrins, here at the bottom of Mullicarn,
Yeah.
and same thing. Once you know what it's like, you wouldn't really live anywhere else.
Yes.
And for listeners who might have not yet tasted your cheese, let's give them a picture of your craft. Can you describe what it is you do day to day?
Day to day, there's always something to be doing, whether you're making or whether you're aging or whether you're packaging. Since it's just the two of us running the business, we wear many hats, and sort of there's always something to be turning your hand to. But as it stands, I create a range of about 8 cheeses, some cow, some goat, different styles, washed rind, hard. Fresh cheeses, blue cheeses, so we create a range of cheeses here, and I do a range of chutneys and other condiments that go along with the cheeses.
And did you have to go to cheese college, or like is it just trial and error? How did you build your knowledge?
It's kind of a mix. It's a mix of cheese college and trial and error. Sometimes more trial, sometimes more error. I have done a number of different courses, down at Lockery College, down at the University College Cork, the School of Artisan Food over in England. But I found that the best way to learn was by doing. And courses are fantastic, but you have to almost kind of blunder around on your own first, because you need to know what mistakes you're going to make, what obstacles you're going to run up against. And so it's only when you sort of get the measure of those can you then go to a course and go to a professional or an instructor and say, look, I'm having trouble with this and this, could you tell me why this is, what would I need to, so I think you have to have a period of learning by doing, and then you build on it with consulting professionals, consulting other cheesemakers, consulting, I've read every cheese book going, and there's still tons and tons to learn. So it's been a multi-pronged education.
Have you had many sort of failures? I don't know, do you call them batches, or I don't know, runs, or, have you had a situation where you've had to tip the whole lot because something went completely AWOL on you, or some,
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone who says they haven't had those mistakes is lying, because they are part and parcel of that education. And the great thing about making sort of giant mistakes is you never make them again.
mm, I
The
imagine.
the time I left, I cut the cheese curd, to begin the process of cheese making, and I left the big thermometer out of the cheese vat, while I was cutting, and then I failed to put it back in, so the cheese felt like it was getting a little chilly and started heating and heating and heating and heating. Yeah, that whole
Mm,
batch had to go. But I've never done that, in the
again,
15 years since. Yeah, there were other things. The time I decided, because we're all just kind of, no cheesemakers are doing anything sort of truly new. We're all just, excuse the pun, reinventing the wheel. But
yeah.
so I thought, I would try, in the style of one of my favorite cheeses that's made in the United States. I thought I would try washing the wheels of my blue cheese in a apple brandy, just to give
Uh-huh.
a distinctive taste. And it was a fantastic taste, but it turned the wheels. bright, luminous pink. So that was
Ah,
another delicious, but not commercially viable. So
oh, oh. Are mistakes expensive?
mistakes are expensive, and I'm very good at sort of continuing to beat myself up over X, Y, or Z where I have failed to do whatever. So, but as I say, they really, big mistakes stick in your head, and all you can do is learn from them and keep on keeping on.
Tend not to repeat them,
You do
preferably.
not. No, no. Once is enough. Once is more than enough.
And do you have a preference for making a particular type of cheese, say a hard cheese or a soft cheese? You have your own personal preference for the actual process as opposed for tasting it or eating it?
It depends, and I think that's probably why I make, usually with cheesemakers, you might concentrate on one style or one individual cheese, and I've found myself making a range of 8, and I think it's because possibly I have a short attention span, but also because I love the different processes. I love the fact that with one ingredient and a couple of additions of salt and bacterial cultures, but you're dealing with one main ingredient of milk, and you can turn it into, there are unlimited varieties of cheese that can be made by sort of tweaking a certain detail, a way that it's made, the degree to which the milk is heated, how it's aged. It sort of offers endless possibilities, and for me, endless interest in the process.
That's fascinating. Which brings me, well, actually, there's another question I want to ask you in between. Have you good sort of cheese making community network around you, or do you tend to be sort of solo operator?
I tend to be sort of a solo operator, and I think as I've gotten older, I become sort of more hermit-like and solitary, and and the cheese definitely lends itself to that. I can spend days out there without seeing another living soul, bar the people I live with, and whether that's good or bad for me, I don't know, but it has been a little bit sort of uncharted territory because there wasn't that tradition up here of other small makers. But before we started, there was a couple who were wrapping up their cheese operation up on the North Coast, and they were incredibly generous with their time and their insight and the knowledge they had gleaned from their experience in sort of sharing, the ups and downs. So there is that. But, I think probably while I haven't had a lot of, sort of direct learning from other cheesemakers, I've had a lot of direct learning from other people who run small businesses, regardless of what they make, what they sell, what they craft, there's a commonality there. There's a sort of shared experience of the various hurdles and the pitfalls and the successes, that come
Hmm.
from running your own business, regardless of whether it's cheese or what have you. So there is that sort of community, and that's one of the things that we have tried to do is to partner with other small businesses, because as you know from living in the Sperrins, we're quite peripheral.
Hmm.
And nobody's gonna trek all the way out here to see one cheesemaker, but if you can create a kind of a craft or food trail and a number of crafters, producers, makers, what have you, it can be very useful.
Okay. And coming to the product itself and its one main ingredient, milk. Where do you source your milk from?
With the likes of the goat's milk we get from, it's about 4 miles down the road from a place called Craigman Goat Farm, and they approached us a number of years ago. I think they were mainly in sheep farming, but they said that they were gonna expand to goats and would be interested in taking the milk, and that has grown from there, and they've been really really great to work with.
So it's all goat's cheese you make.
No, and we do cow as well, and that we just get from Strathroy over in Oma.
Oh yeah. Okay. And I suppose this brings us to the heart of it, the land itself and everything it gives you. Um, when you think about what makes good cheese possible, clean air, clean water, healthy soil, the seasons and the farms around you. How do all these elements come together in the actual making of your cheese?
Well, you can't make good cheese out of bad milk, and you can't get good milk out of animals who, don't have a quality of life, who don't have what they need in terms of clean water, decent forage, things like that. I look at the mistakes that in my own country, in the United States, these sort of massive feedlots,
Yeah.
with thousands and thousands of cattle with not a blade of grass between them, and I look at the sort of the demise in the United States of small family farms. The numbers have plummeted in the last 50 or 60 years, to make way for these massive operations. And I I have been very privileged to look around me, both with the fellows who provide us with this goat's milk, and to just other farmers working the area, that is not the model they follow. They follow a model that relies on green pasture, on good, safe water, and a sort of an attention to detail, and attention and focus on the animal, which is what you're relying on to get these byproducts. So
So local food for local people would be at the core of really what you're up to here.
we would 100%, and sort of small production is the area that interests me, and which I think makes for a better product. One of the nicest things that anyone has ever said about my cheese, which I remember, to this day, it was at a farmer's market we were doing, and it was an older gentleman I was speaking to, and he said, he tasted my cheese, and he said, "This is how cheese used to taste." And I thought that was really,
Interesting.
a good sign. I think we've kind of lost sight of what things are supposed to taste like, and we've lost sight of seasonality, and we've lost sight of, we want what we want 12 months of the year. And I'm to blame as much as anyone. I'm a consumer myself, but I think regardless of season, regardless of locale, regardless of climate, I think we want what we want when we want it, and generally the market delivers. And I think, you know, what I've tried to do here is kind of take a step back from that and appreciate that there is a seasonality to things, and there should be a seasonality to things. We'll taper off the goat production in about a week or so, as the guys dry the goats off for the new kidding season, and we'll not get the milk from them again until late February or March. So there are certain cheeses that I make that won't be available in that time, and I think that's okay, and it's as it should be.
Just come back there to the process of are there some cheeses that store for longer than others of your own cheeses? Like,
Oh yeah, there's a cheese that I make that's ready to eat in a couple of days, and then there's cheeses I have in there that are 15 months old. So it depends on the process. If you want, you will treat the milk and the cheese curd in a different way if you're making a fresh cheese as opposed to making a long aged cheese. The cheese making is sort of done and dusted, in a day, but the sort of more in-depth work happens with how you age the cheese on, and the conditions which you age it on, because there are cheeses that will, sit in my storeroom for the next 5 months, 12 months, 18 months, what have you, until that they're ready to go. It's one of the things that when I first moved here, I have to tell you, if you didn't know, your weather is terrible. It's truly shocking, but it's absolutely perfect for cheese making. It's all sort of, high relative humidity, sort of fairly moderate temperatures, and it really is, it's absolutely perfect for cheese making. So, yeah, there's a real difference, from a cheese you can eat hours after it's made to a cheese that you're not going to crack into for, a year, 15 months, 18 months, what have you.
oh, that's fascinating. I just to loop back in the conversation a little bit. Back in the 70s, I would have been in France two, if not three times, on doing these student exchanges, and in the vain hopes of my parents that I would learn a second language.
Yes.
Um, However, that was the first time I encountered cheeses that wasn't golden veal cheeses. That's all we had in Ireland back then. And it blew the socks off me. I remember clearly, and of course, it would have been all artisan cheeses in France at that point. I couldn't get over the taste and the variety and the number and being in the markets and seeing hundreds of cheese. I just thought cheese came in one yellow block and that was it.
Yeah.
And I came
And
back.
I think that there's room for both those type of cheeses. I like a good supermarket cheddar as much as the next guy. So, there's room for all, there's room for everybody on
Horses for
that cheese board.
courses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You've just painted a picture of a livelihood that's deeply tied to place. And let's widen that lens now. There's a narrative here, especially in the Sperrins, that the only economic opportunity is extraction. And your business tells a very different story. From your experience, what does a sustainable livelihood look like here in the Sperrins?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to the geomorphology of this land, or sort of the sort of all of the environmental impacts of this land. But what I can speak to, which is what I know and what I have always been involved with, is tourism, especially food tourism. And what I see in this extraction model that is being peddled as if it's going to be great for the area is certain elements pushing a belief that that money is going to stay anywhere within this community. That money is going to go straight into the shareholders of these mining companies, and once it's gone, it's gone.
Hmm.
Taken, what will be depleted by these processes, you know, you're never getting that back. You can talk about rewilding, or you can talk about sort of reintroduction of species, but once you break that ecosystem, you are never going to fix it. You are never going to be able to restore it. And the thing that I don't really understand, also with this model of extraction as the only means of profit, um, is it's not renewable. What it leaves in its wake is devastating, for the communities that are left behind, and the ecosystem that is left behind. But I also, the one of the many, many things that this country has going for it is tourism. We get so many international visitors, and they are absolutely stunned by what they see in the Sperrins. They cannot believe, as they look around, at the sort of, the riches of the natural world that they see around them. So, and and I uh, and I think that to sort of to cut that off, because that is renewable. If you
Yeah.
continue to have this incredibly beautiful landscape and an incredibly welcoming community, tourists, international visitors, other businesses who are not involved in extraction will continue to come here, and they will continue to spend money. They will continue to put back into the community, and they will continue to tell the next people and the next people and the next people, incredible stories about this beautiful country. Once you strip it of the resources it has, and leave the sort of the detritus and the implications, in air quality, water, etc., behind, you've lost something again that you can't get back. What I found fascinating about watching this gold mining, narrative play out, is one of the things that we were tasked with doing before we were given permission to open the cheese, is we had to, because whey, which is the byproduct of cheese making,
Hmm.
which is the very acidic liquid that comes, when you separate between the liquid and solid proteins, is we couldn't discharge that into, the regular sewerage system. We had to get a special tank built to take away the whey as a waste product, because obviously we're directly, next to the Fawn, the River Fawn, one of the rivers that flows into the Foyle, and so we had to prove that we had a plan in place to take care of our byproduct, our dangerous byproduct, which is whey, to make sure that it didn't get into the water table. And the fact that we had to do that, and absolutely understand why we had to do that, because the implications of it getting into the river system would not be good. But the fact that the government is entertaining allowing this kind of extraction and this kind of leaching and tailings and what have you to be to be discharged into the area around, it's a bit strange.
A bit rich, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah, yeah.
I'm interested. I didn't realize that you were releasing water back into the Fahan, and I'm guessing that's the same Fahan that where my boy dump in Derry is situated, of which supplies the drinking water for Derry. Um, and here you are as a small producer, possibly with quite crippling financial implications to organise that you can return the water back to the river unpolluted, and yet these major companies, all the illicit dumping that was going on in my boy dump, and also these extractive companies now, which will eventually feed into the Foyle River system and out into Lough Foyle, and even and if there is a collapse in the waste mining, waste tailings dumps, the implications, will spread 60, 50 or 60 kilometres out into the surrounding watershed. And um, so it seems like small companies are experiencing huge regulation, yet the large companies, which will bring profound and lasting changes to the upland Sperrins, some of the environmental concerns, the actual they're not even bothering um to uh, check the if, for instance, if there's a spill or whatever, and unless it hits a certain percentage points over and beyond the levels met, they don't bother even checking it out to see what's happened. So if there was uh, a percentage put on it, okay, you're allowed 60% into water, and they go to 3 or 4 or 5 points above that. They don't even bother checking, and then what's the point in setting boundaries for these companies if they're not even going to implement them? So sorry, that's a long spiel on top of.
No, and I think also it's kind of a case of closing the door after closing the barn door after the horse is bolted, because by the time you realize that there's been a discharge of effluents or what have you,
Uh-huh.
it's too late. You
Gone.
can't you can't undo that.
Yeah. Yeah. So was it difficult to build a living based on your skill and the local resources, rather than one on short-term profit? So, you had to set all these things in place before you could go ahead and do it. Um, I'm obviously not going to ask you about your balance sheet, but, at what point did you say, yeah, this is a business, sorted. We can get a living out of this?
You know, we're still, we're still skirting that line, but we did benefit from a farm diversification grant, which is what allowed us to turn. When we came out to the house, there was just a big old corrugated shed, and that allowed us to convert that into a food manufacturing facility. So things like that, have been very helpful in terms of making a go of it. We are making a go of it, but we've had to look at other things. We've started increasingly doing tours. We built in the last 2 years sort of a visitor center, and we now do tours, cheesemaking tours. As I say, we work with other local producers to visit them and to visit us to talk about how we make and what we make. So you're always looking to kind of, well, where else can I sort of expand this to kind of draw in more revenue? And again, that's where my better half, Kevin, who's the business head behind the operation, has been, incredibly great at sort of seeking out a customer base, getting involved with other producers, sort of working on this. When we ever go places, to on vacation or whatever, it's one of the things that we're always interested in doing. We like to go and, well, what do you make here? How do you make it? How long have you been making it? What, and it's the kind of thing we are interested in ourselves. And lucky for us, it seems to be increasingly the type of tourism that other people are interested in. And again, I really think that tourism here is a limitless resource, and it really fits in with a model of long-term thinking of how this country, these producers, individuals can continue to be profitable and to make a go of it. If people are still interested in coming here to see, all the richness that this place, that the Sperrins, et cetera, has to offer.
If you were speaking to someone with a dream of starting a rural business, food, craft, tourism, anything really, what would you say to them about what is possible here?
I would say, make your contacts, form your networks, find other people who are doing. It doesn't even have to be the same field or the same area, but other people who have started the way you've started, and rely on them to tell you their successes and their pitfalls and their, yeah, invest in community, invest in speaking to people. Who will tell you the straight story, and as I say, look out for we've again been fortunate to get a few sort of innovation vouchers, one at the Lockery, the Food Technology Center down there, and one more recently at the Foodivation Center in Derry, to see what resources are out there for product development. There are a lot of good schemes that help small businesses. And so I would advise that as well.
If your purity of the water were compromised in the Sperrins, would that be a risk for you?
Oh, I would think it would be a risk for all of us, as households, as businesses, as anything. You would second guess every breath of air. You would second guess, like my kids, when we moved out here, they spend most of their time hurling themselves into the pond, and I didn't give it a second thought. They dived into the river and splashed around, and it didn't occur to me, but the more you think about sort of this uh, this desire to kind of double down on extraction in this area, the more you would think about every breath, every mouthful of water. Obviously, what's in the soil is in the grass, is in the animals, is in the milk, is in you.
Hmm.
And it's a pretty short, in terms of taint and pollution and contamination. It's a pretty short leap, from extraction to ill health. And that's another, that's another thing that I wonder about. I mean, I'm not, I have no business sort of pondering the ways and means of government, but I wonder if our elected representatives think, boy, this is going to take a health toll on our population too, if our water isn't clean, if our air isn't clean. Somebody's got to pay for that.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it often makes me wonder, does nobody in government have any children or any generations coming behind them? Because there
yeah,
seems to be very short-term thinking,
yeah.
something in line with to the length of the next election and about the politics of power and money, as opposed to well-being and health and the needs of the population. But I do think that this is becoming more and more apparent in the world. and that many people are beginning to stand up and say, actually, this far or no further, you don't represent the people on the ground, and there's change coming, and we may not like change and the way it arrives, but it feels like that the people are beginning to speak and take back the power back into the local communities.
Yeah.
And I think the government is very well aware of this, and particularly those who pull the power strings and hold the purse strings, and they would prefer to keep us all in the dark, and the money to keep rolling in. But in actual fact, there's more transparency, really, probably because of social media for all its ills. But more and more people are beginning to become aware, no, this is not for us,
Yes.
and the change comes from the ground up, and I do feel there's change coming. Hopefully, it arrives quick enough for us to, particularly in relation to the climate conversation, or the climate emergency, as I call it, because it's not climate change. We're in a climate emergency, and
Yes.
it frightens. It frightens me for my children, my grandchildren, and we're in very short term now. We've got maybe 5 years left, 3 years left to do something about it, and then we're into a runaway climate, temperatures going through the roof and so on. But I'm sure you know all of this, Julie. And
Yeah, and I was listening to your conversation with Annie Mullen there, and she hit the nail on the head with, with her point that we're just custodians of this space, of this earth, where we have to keep it and guard it, and then pass it along, and
uh-huh.
leave it no worse off than when we found it, and hopefully better.
Yeah, and that's so very true. We are the guardians of it, and we have to look after it. Just moving on a little bit. So I know I've run a small business here for years as well, and I don't do it alone. And I'm sure it's the same for you guys. So what role has the local community played in supporting or working with you, or indeed against you, maybe over the years? How has that worked out for you?
No, it's worked great. I mean, that, the sense of community that we have here is in Park is really fantastic. I mean, we have lived here for 20 years, and I know that, should there be any, my children's children will probably still be seen as blow-ins. But
Mm.
as blow-ins, we've had an incredibly great reception. People seem, curious about what we're doing. They seem engaged with what we're doing. We couldn't have asked to land in a nicer community.
Oh, that's great, and it's so uplifting. Do you think people are becoming more aware of the link between local food, healthy land, and strong communities?
I think people are, but again, I think we all crave, you know, fresh strawberries in mid-February, and so it's sort of reminding ourselves that that the world, that nature has its own clock, and we should pay attention to it, and its own calendar, and we should pay attention to it. And I'm not saying that as a means of sort of going backward, but I do think people are more interested in the link, and I think a lot of people just maybe haven't thought about it because they haven't thought about it. The more people we get coming on, we do a lot of visits with community groups and education, things like that, and people come out, and after I give my song and dance about how cheese is made, they're like, I have no idea that this was involved or that was involved. And anytime I visited other producers, I'm always fascinated. Who knew that this was made by this, and I think people are very curious about where things come from. I think we've been very lucky with local hotels and restaurants and chefs, and small business owner shops and things that sell our produce. That people are interested in provenance, and that chefs are more likely these days to sort of name check small businesses on their menus, and are proud to say that we get our this, that, and the other, from 2 miles down the road, 10 miles down the road, what have you. And I think it goes back to, they always speak about, when you think about sort of wine production, people always speak about terroir, which is, what what the individual wines or what get from the land, from the specifics of the land, from the minerality in the soil or the air or the
Yeah.
climate, what have you. And I think terroir can be applied to so many food types. And I think
Hmm.
terroir is incredibly important in the Sperrins, because what we have here is incredibly individual. It's it, it, it it's the best of all worlds, and it should shine through in what we produce here, and hopefully it does shine through, and hopefully people will continue to seek that type of thing out.
Oh, that's great. Um, Looking further ahead now, let's talk about the future. What kind of sperms would you love to see for your family or for future generations to inherit?
I would like to see exactly the one we have right now, or maybe one from a few decades ago. And again, when I think about progress, progress and is not always sort of more or better or what have you. Progress is realizing that what you have right now is pretty great. And progress is knowing not only that it's pretty great, but that you'd better preserve it before it's gone. So that to me is progress. When I was a child, we were fortunate enough to go up on vacation up to the northern part of Maine, up in the far northeast of the United States, and we went to the same place every year. We packed all dogs, kids, sleeping bags, bug spray,
Hmm.
camping gear into the station wagon. We drove 8 hours up to the just below the Canadian border, and we roamed the forests and explored the tide pools and what have you. And that was, in the early 70s.
Hmm.
And I went back about 4 years ago, to scatter my father's ashes, because that's where he wanted to go. And it was exactly the same as it was 40, 50 years ago. And I thought, well, that's progress. That's perfect.
Yeah. Um, Sometimes I think about this and I think about things that I would have seen in my youth, which my children have never seen. One of them being grasshoppers. I, as a child, I remember we used to catch them and put them into jam jars, and you stroke the back of a grasshopper and it jumps. But in all my years here in Tyrone, I've never seen a grasshopper.
Mm,
And they have died out for some reason. I don't know why that is, but particularly around here. And so we set different baselines. So that's the baselines that I would have grown up with, but previous to that, my parents and my grandparents would have had a different baseline. They would have known, much more diversity and a much
yeah.
richer ecology. And then going forward, I look at my children and my grandchildren, and when I was a child, I had this tree house in a big, big sycamore tree, and we used to sleep in it. And when in the evening, the you'd see all the crows and jackdaws coming back to roost, and the sky would darken with the number of birds coming in to roost, and
Yeah.
this where this big tree was situated. And here in the evenings, I often watch the crows coming back to roost, in Rash Wood, which is about a mile down the road, but they fly over our house, and there's just a few handfuls. Now, I'm quite sure in the past there would have been massive numbers going over, and explaining to the children when they were growing up that the sky used to be black and where I came from. And I'm quite sure back there now it doesn't exist at all. And there's a kind of a sadness in me because where the baseline keeps changing and our children don't know. They think this is good, this is green, this is good, this is nice, and there's so much already being lost, And then over the last and since the 70s, I think we've lost 75% more of our species in the world,
Mm,
and we don't see it because we inherit a different. Each generation inherits a different baseline, and that's frightening. So even if we had the Sperrins as it is going forward, that would be a win. But I personally believe we have to go back and build up the ecology of the sperms as well, to make them more robust. Anyways.
Yeah, you can't have those parameters shrinking year on year, generation to generation. And you only know what you know. So, if something's gone before you get here or as you're coming into consciousness, you won't know. It'll still be nice, but you won't
Precisely.
know you won't know what you've missed.
So coming back to yourselves, if you knew at the start what you know now, is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, yeah, probably everything, but also I think hindsight's really a dangerous one. I think if we knew then what we knew now, we wouldn't go forward. I think you have to kind of just keep crashing forward and make your mistakes and hopefully learn from them. But I try somewhat unsuccessfully to spend as little time as possible in the woulda, coulda, shoulda is sort of realm, and I just try and keep going forward. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I get that.
Keep going forward or around in circles. I can't tell which one it is, but it's
You
one
you
of the
keep
two.
you keep getting out of bed in the morning anyways.
That's it.
Um, so, two questions to ask at the end of every podcast. Is there anyone you think would bring a fresh or important perspective to the themes we explore here? And that could be local experience or expertise or creativity from anywhere around the world, or indeed a lived insight.
I think, obviously, great people to have on this are people who've got the facts in their back pocket and people who say, this is why it's not. And I know that you all have done some of that. And I know it requires deep pockets to get those sort of authorities on X, Y, or Z to tell us why this, going down this extraction road will be, catastrophic. So, industry experts who can tell us why in very quantifiable ways, that this is not a good path. The other thing that I always think, I've been reading this book about why people continue to vote for parties who ultimately it seems don't have their best interest at heart and who they are quantifiably hurt by the policies of, and why people keep voting seemingly against their best interests. And I always think, and what this person sought to do in this book is to seek out the people who, because I imagine that many people listening to your podcast probably agree with the things that you're talking about here. Um, so it would be interesting to get more people who sort of really feel very strongly that this is a good road to go down, and to have them on to say, all right, well, what makes you think, show me in fact and in quantifiable terms why you think this is a good road because it's only when we can sort of get inside the mind of people who think in opposing ways to us. I think that's when we can also learn an awful lot.
Do you know, I'm inclined to agree with you on that last point that you made. Obviously, the industry experts, that's a not very obvious one, and we're
Yeah,
trying to pick those off, as you've probably noticed through the podcast, you
absolutely.
know.
Yeah.
But I also thought it would be a good idea to have people who have a different opinion about this and bring them on. I have others in my group who have shot this suggestion down, not willing to give them a voice.
Yeah,
But I,
and I don't mean the people, representatives of the companies, because they don't need any more of a platform than they already have. But I mean people who really feel strongly that it is a good idea. Because as I said, it's only when you kind of have people really, really, because we all believe what we believe, and I believe very strongly what I believe, so you must be wrong. So I need to see why you think you're right, and somewhere between, between those 2 points, it is an awfully good debate, and it would be interesting.
It would be it would be extremely interesting, and
Yeah,
indeed, um, whenever I've thought about who I could possibly get to come on the podcast, bringing that point of view, invariably they end up being someone who is either paid by the extractive mining companies, or people who want to remain in power,
yeah,
and who will benefit because of coming down to the actual money coming into the coffers, and whether that's a personal benefit or a party benefit. And I'm kind of reluctant to get politicians on to give them, because then, yeah, then you become a platform for something else.
absolutely. Yeah.
And trying to avoid the politician. But I will think it over. And if anyone occurs to you in the future, or someone comes to you with a suggestion, I'm very open to, if you can say a particular person. It's very hard to find someone who has that knowledge and can put up a cogent argument as to why there's only one argument, and it's the economic argument. There is no
It
other argument.
And it isn't someone in particular that I have in mind.
Yeah,
It's just a local resident who believes in their heart of hearts that this is what's good for their community, for their family, for their own, and sort of to get behind the thinking of, because I don't think we like to have our minds changed in this world of ours.
yeah.
We like to stick, we don't like nuance. We like to feel that we are right and the other person is wrong. And so to kind of to find that gray area, and to find somebody who feels as strongly about it in an opposing way, I think that would be interesting. It probably wouldn't change one's mind from their own position, but it would be interesting to
Hear the argument.
to hear the argument, to hear the reasoning, to hear the influences that have brought them to those decisions.
Okay, I will go and actively search out that person. I might do a shout out on Facebook and see does anyone come forward.
Mm.
Um, Perhaps someone will come forward from listening to this podcast. Um, okay, let's put that down. I wanted to ask you before we go, where can, if people are interested in having a tour around your cheese making, or indeed wanted to buy cheese and so on, where can they get that information?
Oh, this is great. I not only get to hear myself talk for the guts of an hour, and now I get a commercial plug in. This is fantastic. Um, Everything, local shops, from ourselves. We have a website, dartmountaincheese.com. Give us a shout, and we can point you in the right direction.
And if people were to come and get a guided tour of your facility, like, do you have a sort of a facility where they get a cup of tea or something like that, or how does that work?
Yeah, we do a thing. People come into the production area, and I kind of take them through the stages of cheese making, and then I talk about the sort of aging process and the affinage and aftercare of the cheeses, and we go into the aging room, and I talk about that process, and then we have a small visitor center with sort of information panels, and you come in there afterwards, and you get a full tasting of the cheeses and a cup of tea, and sit down. So we do school groups and community groups, and private tours, and we've also recently started working with a woman who does sort of wellness retreats, and she brings people to kind of use the space. And again, I think that's a testament to the kind of the beauty and the sort of the peace and tranquility and the kind of, yeah, all the things that the Sperrin gives you. Is people seem to like to come here just to kind of to be in this area, because it's incredibly enriching, this location, this environment. So yeah, we do a range of tours, with some other producers, with just on our own, and then as I said, we go out to community groups, or they come to us, and we just talk about the cheese.
That's really great. And I will put your website and your social media and so on into the show notes. So people, if they're listening to the podcast, they can just check out to the show notes and all your information will be there. And um, my last question, what keeps you going? Keeps you grounded and hopeful and getting out of bed in the morning?
Well, there isn't any really alternative, is there? I mean, you can't, you kind of just have to keep going. I will not to end on on kind of a down note, but I'm not hopeful. I don't feel hopeful right now. I see people like you fighting the good fight, to your, and keeping on battling. Yeah, we all seem to be in a bit of a dark place right now. I'm looking at my own country and watching our current administration tear the place apart, and
Mm,
watching, and I think that that seems to be a theme of much of the world. As long as we keep everybody on the ground fighting with each other, we won't notice what the big guys are doing.
yeah,
So and I hope, you spoke earlier about people coming to a realization that they have power, and that they have, the ability to affect change in their local environment, in their
yeah.
wider environment. And so I suppose that, you know, uh, I'm hoping we will all, myself included, wake up and take more of a hand in, in deciding what our future is going to look like.
Yeah, and that's the best any of us can do, get to work in our own local arena and take it from there.
That's the
Yeah, a hope can be a pretty pointless exercise, but getting up to stuff in the world, even just what you're doing, making cheeses, local cheeses for local people, producing decent food, that's massive in itself.
It's not massive, but it makes up part of a framework that, it's a small bit in the framework. It's not life-changing work, but it's good work. I enjoy it, and hopefully other people enjoy it too. And it's one small part of a community, everyone working at their own thing, and hopefully continuing to feel that sense of community.
Julie, thank you so much for this conversation,
Thank you.
for sharing your story with us. It's been a real pleasure. You might call it food for the soul.
Do that. Thank you very much. I appreciate this.
That was such a fascinating conversation with Julie from Dart Mountain Cheese. I loved hearing not only about the craft of cheesemaking itself, but also about what it really takes to build a sustainable way of making a living here in the Sperrin Mountains. They've shown so clearly how food production, artisanal skills, and added value can form the backbone of a rural economy that actually works for people and place. And I was especially struck by the way they link up with others, like the local goat farmer and the network of small producers whose work complements one another. When you start to see these connections, you realize how a food trail or a cluster of small independent makers can become a genuine economic ecosystem in its own right. And Julie raised something unexpected but really important: the idea of speaking to someone from within our community who genuinely believes that mining could make life better. Not someone from the company, but an ordinary person who feels strongly that this could be a good thing and who is able to speak factually and honestly about why. What a conversation that would be. Not to give the company a platform, but to understand the hopes, the fears, and the lived realities behind those views. That's the sort of dialogue that deepens a community rather than divides it. That was such a fascinating conversation with Julie from Dart Mountain Cheese. I loved hearing not only about the craft of cheese making itself, but also about what it really takes to build a sustainable way of making a living here in the Sperrin Mountains. They've shown so clearly how food production, artisanal skills, and added value can form the backbone of a rural economy that actually works for people and place. And I was especially struck by the way they link up with others, like the local goat farmer and the network of small producers whose work complements one another. When you start to see these connections, you realise how a food trail or a cluster of small independent makers can become a genuine economic ecosystem in its own right. And Julie raised something unexpected but really important. The idea of speaking to someone from within our community who genuinely believes that mining could make life better. Not someone from the company, but an ordinary person who feels strongly that this could be a good thing and who is able to speak factually and honestly about it. What a conversation that would be, not to give the company a platform, but to understand the hopes, the fears, and the lived realities beyond those views. That's the sort of dialogue that deepens a community rather than divides it.
You've been listening to the Save Our Sperrins podcast, Voices from the Frontline. Thank you for joining us today. All the links you'll need, from campaign updates to our social media pages, as well as links shared by today's guests and resources mentioned in the conversation, are available in the show notes. Please take a moment to share this podcast with friends, neighbours, or anyone who cares about protecting our land and communities. And don't forget to hit the follow button on your podcast platform. It really helps the algorithm spread these voices further. Together, our voices are stronger. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep standing with the land, the water, the air, and the people who protect them.